Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's learning webinar. My name is Chantal, and I'm going to be your host today as we look at foundations. We're going to be looking at putting in footings and foundation walls and many different types of styles. And then we're going to open up the chat panel where you can type in your questions that you might have about a foundation plan that you're working on that you might need some help with and some ideas on how to create it. Following the entire presentation, we'll open up the chat panel first, and then we will send everybody out a booklet that you'll be able to read about everything that we've covered in today's class as well. So during the presentation, if you do have any questions, make sure that you take the time to type them out in our chat panel on the GoToMeeting console. And once I'm done the formal portion of the presentation, I'll be able to address your questions and look at those directly for you. So let's get started and looking at foundations. As you can see on my screen, I have just a simple floor plan drawn, just a ground floor plan. And off to the one side of the floor plan and the walls, I've got a single column sitting there. So we're going to discuss putting a foundation system underneath this ground floor plan, and we'll be looking at two different types of foundation systems to do that. Before I put the foundation system underneath the home, let's look at our building locations to understand the levels that we're going to be putting this foundation in at. So at the top of the screen, I'm going to go to the Settings pull-down menu. And under Settings, I'm going to look at Building Locations. So right now, the walls that we have drawn are on the ground floor location, which means the floor of the ground floor location is sitting 1 foot 5.5 inches off of grade. The walls themselves are 8 foot high. So when we're looking at a foundation system that's going to come underneath this and support it, we know that the foundation wall is going to have to come up to that height. So I'm just going to use my sketch tool here off to the one side. So we have our floor on our ground floor, and that floor is sitting, if we're looking at grade here, and that distance is that 1 foot 5.5 inches. So when we're looking at that floor, we're going to have our foundation system supporting that floor underneath it. We'll actually draw that out just a little bit out further like that. And then the foundation system itself. So when we're drawing that foundation system that's supporting it, you can see in our foundation location that we have drawn that it has a floor level of -7 foot 6 inches. That means that below this grade mark right here, it's going to go down -7 foot 6 when it hits the floor. I mean, that's the top of the slab in this full basement kind of situation that we've got drawn here. So that's to that level right there, to that floor in our, what looks like a full basement, because the wall height is 8 feet, and we're going 7 feet, -7 feet 6 inches below grade till we get to that floor slab in the basement. With that as well, you can also see that I have also drawn, just for today's class as an example, we also have a slab on grade location. And that slab on grade location is going to, and I'm just going to erase everything that I drew there and draw it again. So when we're looking at the floor, this time it's going to be a slab that we're going to draw, and then we're going to have a monolithic slab situation. And that slab, we're going to keep it coming up so that it's 1 foot 5.5 inches off of grade. So there's quite the step up. There's quite a bit of a monolithic slab going on there for that height. So when you're looking at building a foundation, always think, where is that foundation? What's that level that it's going to sit at? Is it going to be a full basement? Do I need to go down 7 feet below grade to hit that, and that's going to give me my slab? Or am I simply supporting the floor that's drawn on my ground floor location, and I'm putting a footing system underneath it? Then I need to match wherever I'm going to be going into that level of the floor on that ground floor to support it. Either situation, make sure that these values right here, this floor level, that's the critical value. That's where we're going to be drawing the floor slab in a full basement situation, or that's where the slab on grade is going to exist on that location if you're going to be creating that slab on grade. So if your slab on grade is simply that it's the slab itself, the ground floor location is simply 6 inches above grade, that value would be 6 inches above grade. Okay, so whatever that value is on that floor level, when you're coming in on that ground floor location, that's what that floor level needs to be for that ground floor. And for my slab on grade location, those are going to match if you're having a slab on grade situation. I'm going to put two different examples in. I'm going to put a full basement in so we can see how that goes in. And I'm going to be putting in a monolithic slab to show how that could be supported as well. And then we'll talk about peer supported systems as well in our examples. So looking at those values, and I just wanted to point them out, what I'm dealing with in our situations that we're drawing today, so you can see the values that we're putting in there when we go to draw. Okay. When I put a foundation system in, regardless if it's going to be a slab on grade situation or it's going to be a full basement situation, I always use the floor and foundation builder. If you've never used the floor and foundation builder before, this tool is going to enable us to not only put in the footings, but also put in the floor slab and any kind of stem wall all at the same time. And what's even better about this floor and foundation builder is that as I'm putting it in, it's going to allow me to place the stem walls and place the footings and place the slab exactly where I want them to be in relation to my ground floor plan. So let's use this system and I can show you how we can do that. So I'm choosing floor and foundation builder. The first screen that comes up is just going to be a welcome screen that's going to tell you a little bit about the tool that you're going to be using. I'll guide you through that so we can just click next. This next screen is important. It allows you to do one of two things. It's called the floor and foundation builder because I can do two different things. I can put an additional floor level on, build an additional story if I choose floor level. So I could put on a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth floor if I wanted to by choosing floor level. It knows I want to build underneath and support my ground floor location if I choose foundation level. So I'm going to choose foundation level, obviously, for today's class. We'll be building the foundation underneath our ground floor location. When I choose foundation level, then I have to choose the location that I'm going to build it on. And this looks directly back at those building locations that we were just looking under settings, building locations. So here I can choose my foundation or I could choose my slab on grade situation that I've put in here as an example for today. So we'll start off by doing the foundation location, which we remember by, and we can look at it again by clicking on this button, the floor level, that slab for my basement is going to be -7'6" below grade, but the walls it's going to draw are going to be 8-foot tall walls. So we'll just accept that, but you could go back into that dialog box by picking on that button and change any of those values if you need to. Now that I've told it I'm building a foundation underneath my ground floor on the foundation location, I can click next. Now it wants to know, well, what type of foundation system are you building? Is it a monolithic slab? Is it a slab on grade? Is it a full basement? Is it a stem wall and footing? So we can see the most options to start off with is the basement option. You'll notice down at the bottom of the screen, I can't click next. It won't allow me to continue on in this dialog box until I specify the materials that I want for the walls, the floors, and the footings. And once I do that and I make my specifications for each portion, then I'll be able to click next. So I'll click on walls. It'll take me back into the catalog, same catalog where you're building the walls when you're drawing your ground floor walls, same catalog. And I'll just scroll down and I'll tell it that I want a 10-inch concrete wall. And I click OK. Next, I need to choose the type of floor that I want. Again, brings me back into the catalog where I can choose a floor, and I'll tell it that I want a 4-inch concrete floor slab, and I click OK. Then I have to choose my footing size. Takes me into a catalog of different footing style choices, and if I'm in this dialog box, and if this is true when I'm selecting my walls or when I'm selecting my floors, if I'm in this dialog box and I don't see the size of footing that I need, or I don't see the wall that I needed, or I didn't see the floor I needed, I can always create it here on the fly. And when I create it here, it will be there in my catalog for any future projects that I build. So if I right click in here and say Add element. I'm building a new rectangular solid strip footing that's going to be part permanently of my catalog. So I'll just tell it that I need it to be 18 inches and that I need this to be 36 inches. And that's a new footing size. If I click auto name here, you can see it automatically renames the footing based on the sizes that I chose. So it's a quick way of getting it named, and it's calling out the exact properties that I would like it to have in the name. So when I go to look for it again, I know that this is an 18 by 36 strip footing. Okay. And then I simply just click OK. And there's that 18 by 36 solid strip footing as part of my catalog. It'll be there for good now until I take it out or I delete it. And I'm selecting it. So now that I've chosen all of the materials that I need to build that full basement, now I can click Next. And when I click Next, it gives me an illustration off to the left that I can move around and see how my slab, my footing, and my stem wall are going to correspond with the ground floor wall above. So this gray silhouette wall, it's representative of your ground floor wall. So if they were to sit directly down on that foundation wall, how they would be situated together. And I'm just going to turn them right here so we can see that exact side profile. So you can see in this diagram that the outside edge of my ground floor wall is directly in line with my foundation wall. They're exactly in line. If I wanted that to change, that's when I come over and start making changes over here. This little illustration off to the right shows me that I can change a distance here. I could type in a distance and move the foundation wall either towards the inside or I could move it towards the outside if I need it to move. So if I wanted that brick wall of my ground floor wall to cantilever out a little bit so I could weep out, I could move my my foundation wall, and I could say I want to move my foundation wall maybe by 1 inch, and I'll move it towards the inside. So the foundation wall is the one that's moving. I've moved it 1 inch towards the inside. So you can see now when it goes to line up my foundation to my ground floor walls, my foundation is going to be in 1 inch. And you can see that in that little diagram here to the right. And maybe I'll put this as a hidden line image so we can see that a little bit better there. So you can see the ground floor walls slightly overlapping my foundation walls. Okay, so you can look at that in many different methods here, and this helps you to line up exactly how they're going to be situated underneath your ground floor. So if you're working on a remodel situation where you're going to have some underpinning going on, or you have very thick foundation walls and the ground floor walls are maybe inset, maybe it's a very older home, this is how you're going to be able to accomplish that by moving them and showing them how they exactly line up. What we've adjusted here is the wall, but you can see in this pull-down menu, I can also adjust the other portions of this foundation as well. So I could tell it I want to adjust the floor. So if I wanted to move the floor, maybe show that there is a gap, an expansion joint between the foundation wall and the floor slab, I could again say that I'm going to move that out 1 inch towards the inside, and you can see that gap moving through. Or if this was a slab that was extending all the way out of the wall, maybe I wanted it to come out 2 feet towards the outside. And you can see how that's going to go out 2 feet towards the outside. Or you can leave it at 0, and when it's left at 0, it's going to directly hit up against the side of that stem wall. So again, lots of modifications that you can do so that you can rebuild how you're actually going to have it appear on site so you know that everything's accurate. The other option that you have is adjusting the footing. When the floor and foundation builder stacks these items up initially, the footing is going to be directly centered underneath the stem wall. But again, if you wanted to move it one way or the other in an underpin situation, as an example, I could tell it that I needed to move it 2 feet towards the inside and have it move in, or 1 foot towards the outside. And you could move them around as you need to, or leave it at 0 and it would be exactly centered. So depending on how you want that situation and how that's going to be built, you can move these 3 elements around as you need to. The wall itself, the floor slab, and the footing. And then once you have them in the situation and how they're going to exist on site, you can simply click Next. The last screen of the dialog box is letting you know that as soon as I hit Finish here, it's going to build that foundation system. Underneath my ground floor plan, on my foundation location, there will then exist the footings, the wall, and the floor slab that I've just specified in this dialog box. This is my last opportunity to click back and make any changes to any part of that foundation wall system. I'm happy with my selection, so I simply hit Finish. And if I put this into a 3D view, you can see my foundation system underneath my walls above. Just skinner that around there so you can see them coming through. The gap that's left there is for the floor system that's going to be on my ground floor. I've just got the visibility of it turned off right now, but if there was a floor on my ground floor, it would fill in that space. And the walls themselves, my brick walls, under their properties, if I wanted it to come sit down directly on top of that foundation wall, that's under the properties of the wall itself, where you would adjust the lower exterior face bottom. So I would tell it that I needed to come down 1'5" so that it's coming down that distance between the foundation wall and my ground floor. So it's going to drop that one face for me. So that's why you see the gap. I'm just going to edit undo there so it brings that back up, because I'm going to fill that actually in next by putting in the monolithic slab situation that's going to cover that up as well. I'm going to keep them on both at the same time, not what you would actually build it, but I do want to show you examples of it. You'll also notice that we have our column here on the ground floor and nothing supporting it underneath here in our foundation. A quick way of being able to support that column is to duplicate it to the foundation location and change its type. Let me show you how. I can even do that in this 3D view. It doesn't have to be done in 2D. I'm going to select the column that's inserted on the ground floor. I want to put a foundation system underneath it to support it. So I select that foundation wall or that column. I right click and I tell I want to duplicate it to a location. I want to take a copy of that column and put it in my foundation. So I say duplicate to location and I choose my foundation location and I click OK. Do I want to delete the original one? No, I do not. I'll just say no. And now you can see I have the same column sitting directly underneath the original, but on the different location. This one is on the ground floor. You can see ground floor in brackets. This one is on the foundation location. The one on the foundation location, I don't want it to be the same wood column, however. I want it to be a concrete sonotube poured support for the wood column above. So I select it, I right click, and I choose replace. That'll take me into the columns portion of the catalog so I can select a new type of column. And part of our columns are the concrete columns. So I'll tell it I want a 12 by 12 reinforced concrete column. Or if I wanted it to be a round sonotube style, whatever style and shape you want, you can build it. So I'll just select it and click OK. And now I have that column sitting underneath and supporting the one above it. If I want a footing underneath it, let me put it in 2D to illustrate how that could happen. Down in the lower left-hand corner of my screen, right now I'm looking at my ground floor plan. By clicking here, I want to look at my foundation plan. So I'll choose it, foundation. Now I can see my foundation walls and my footings and the concrete pier that I put in to support that column above it. I want to put in a pad footing underneath that concrete column. To do that, I'd go up to my footings command. My footing command allows me to put in footings 4 different ways. A strip footing by picking points allows me to pick 2 points on my screen, and it will pour a strip footing between those 2 points. A strip footing attached to walls will allow me to select a wall that's drawn on my plan, and it'll put a footing automatically underneath it for me. Mono footings by picking points allows me to pick a point on my screen anywhere and will automatically pour a pad footing exactly where my cursor rested. Mono footings attached to columns is ideal for this situation where we want to put a footing underneath that column. So I'll select it. My catalog panel to the right updates, and you can see all different types of footings. A lot of them are different pier styles, but I'm going to use the 16-inch by 16-inch by 8-inch rectangular mono footing. All I have to do when I've selected that footing is left-click on a column, and it'll automatically put the footing underneath that. And I'll just zoom in there so you can see the footing going all the way around it. So it's automatically put a footing underneath it. So for those of you that are using pier footing situations where you're going to have your pad footing and then maybe a concrete or a brick pier system being built, you could put in one exactly like I just did here. Put in your concrete column, put in your pad underneath it, and then depending on how that pier system is being supported, what we're going to do next is we could even array these. So I could select the column. Holding down my shift key, I'm going to select the footing underneath it. So they're both selected. You can see the first selected item turns to that cyan color and the last selected item turns green, letting me know that they're both selected. And once I have them both selected, I right-click for options on what I can do with both of them at the same time. And what I can do with both of them at the same time is I could duplicate them. I could make just a simple one-time copy of them. But if this was a full pier system and they're spaced out equally underneath my plan, I could say I want to array them. And what array allows me to do is to make copies of this column and this footing underneath it. And I can make copies along a grid system, if you will. So here on number of rows, how many rows across up and down my screen. So I want another one here and another one down here. Maybe I want 3 rows or 10 rows, depending on how big the structure is. You fill in that value right there. So I'll say that I have, say, 6 rows. And then it wants to know how many columns. So across from my current footing and column, I'll say I want another one here, and that means that it would automatically build one here and down below. So you've got your rows and you've got your columns. How many columns, how many rows? And I'll tell it in here that we're going to have 4 rows. And what's the distance between them? Well, I'll tell them that it's every 8 feet either way so that they're both spaced out. So I have 6 rows and 4 columns across of this footing and column, and it's going to space them out 8 feet by 8 feet. I click OK, and if I zoom back out, now you can see that column and footing spaced out 8 feet apart equally in rows and columns. And I've got my 4 columns, and I've got my 5 rows that you can see on the screen. So if you're using a pier foundation system, that's the best way to get them in. Draw one where you know it exists and array the rest of them that equal space apart. Okay, I'm just going to edit, undo that, so we're back down to just having that one copy. Once we have this foundation footprint drawn here on our screen, we can add walls to it as well. So I could take and expand out one of the walls I've already drawn as part of my plan. For example, the one I've selected on the screen. When I select that wall, that foundation wall, you'll notice it has a green dot and a red dot. They're indicating the ends of that wall. And if I put my cursor close to either end, notice my cursor change. Before, my cursor is just an arrow, but when I get it close to the green or the red grip dot, my cursor changes. It's indicating a wall with an arrow coming out of it, letting me know I can stretch it. And just simply by holding down my left mouse button, the wall begins to stretch with me. And I can stretch it all the way over until I get to the perpendicular foundation wall across the room. And when I release my mouse button, it stretched that wall all the way over. Now, I could take advantage of the foundation strip footing that's here as well. And I want to stretch it all the way across too. And if I stretch them all the way to the midpoint, it nicely cleans up those corners for me. So if you have walls that are already there, that's where you can create your secondary walls that are going to support the structure above if you need to. Or simply draw the walls. Grab the wall under the wall tool. You've got your 10-inch concrete wall. You've got an 8-inch concrete wall. Draw them as you normally would on the ground floor location. And then once they're in, take advantage of the strip footings attached to walls, and it'll automatically put them underneath. It's just one step easier to stretch them across, so that's why I like to illustrate that way of doing it, so you can see a time saver there. But if the walls are not in any relation close to any other walls, if you can't just stretch them out, a foundation wall is like a wall on the ground floor. You can pick points to draw it just like you drew the walls on the ground floor above it. And then once that's done, take advantage of strip footing attached to walls. It works exactly the same as mono footings attached to columns that I illustrated for you. Instead of picking on the column, you'd pick on a wall and it would be inserted for you. Okay, so that's the way of building out your full basement foundation plan. Now what I'd like to do is show you an example of how to build that slab on grade situation. So I'm going to go back to my ground floor location. It has to be the current location on the screen when you go to use the floor and foundation builder. The reason it has to be the current one on the screen is whatever's current on the screen is the one it's going to track around to build underneath so it has the same footprint shape. So you can't have the foundation location current because it wouldn't have anything to track around. There's nothing on that location. There is on my ground floor, that footprint that exists of those exterior walls, that's what I want to track around to build the footprint for my slab on grade, just like I did for my full basement. So I'll choose Floor and Foundation Builder again. Again, I'll click Next and tell it that I'm building a foundation level. This time I'm going to tell it that instead of building on the foundation location, I want to build on that slab on grade location that I built. And then I simply click Next. Again, I have to tell it what type of foundation system I'm going to be building. So I can choose my monolithic or my slab on grade. When I'm selecting monolithic or slab on grade, what you'll notice is that walls are grayed out. I don't need to select the walls. They're not part of this system. The walls from the location above are going to bear down on it, but they're not part of the foundation system like they are for a full basement or a stem wall and footing. But I do need footings and floors. But you'll also notice under floors, there's an option there. I already have a floor slab, don't include another. So if you drew a 4-inch concrete slab on your ground floor location, you don't need to draw it again. You can say, I already have one. Floors will become grayed out. You're simply just putting the footings underneath it on this location. But if you haven't drawn that floor and you want it to be part of your foundation system, then make sure that's unchecked and that you click on that floors dialog and select the thickness of the floor slab that you're going to need. And then select the footings. So for our monolithic situation, I'm going to use a tapered stripped footing, and those are my tapers that are underneath it. So I can choose whatever style and size that I want to that's going to suit my situation. So I'm going to choose an 18 by 12 tapered strip footing and click OK. So I've selected my floor and I've selected my footing style. I click Next. Again, it gives you the little illustration of how it's going to draw out the footing and the floor slab for you. And it's going to bring down the ground floor walls directly on top of it so you can see how they would line up. So again, if they need to move one way or the other, you can move that wall. That gray silhouette of the wall is the entire thickness of the wall sitting on top of it. It's not just the stud portion of the wall or the concrete block portion of the wall. It includes the veneer and the drywall if that's specified in your wall above it. It's giving you that entire wall thickness that you have drawn above and how it's going to sit down on it. Okay, so again, you have that same option if you need to move the floor or move the footing. So if my footing is going to move towards the outside or the inside, I'll say it's going to move out 2 inches towards the outside. So maybe you want to have a little brick curb sitting there, then you can do that. You can move that footing out so that the floor slab sits in there. Either way, however you're going to build it, you can draw it and modify the position of the different elements in this portion of the dialog box. Once you again have all of that specified on how everything's going to sit together, you simply click Next, and that last screen again is your last opportunity to click back and make any changes before it actually builds that slab and the footing beneath it. I'll click Finish. And now on my slab on grade situation, I have another footing and floor slab go in. So now you can see the outline of my tapered strip footing. So again, in that same situation, if you have interior walls that need to be supported in this type of system with the footing underneath them, again, you can select the footings that are already part of the drawing itself and stretch them out to fill in that space. Or you can use the strip footings by picking points. And the picking points tool allows you to say, I want one to start, and I'll just grab that same taper. Maybe I want one to start here, and I want it to end here, and show those going through. I want to illustrate something else to you about this. You'll notice that those didn't automatically clean up like the other ones did. Let me show you why. When I'm putting in a footing, it's going to look at my building locations information. And if I look at its elevation here, you can see it's at 0. It's going to put it at right flat 0, right in line with the floor level that I put in for my slab on grade situation, which was 1 foot 5.5 an inch. When I look at the footings that went in with my system, you can see they went -4. They're going 4 inches beneath that floor slab that I poured because they went in at the exact same time. So because these two footings are at 2 different levels, that's why they didn't automatically clean up. So if I take this footing that I just put in and I right click and I tell it that I want to elevate it to -4 inches so that it's in line with the other footings that are there that are sitting underneath that 4-inch floor slab. That's why they went down 4 inches to sit underneath the floor slab. If I click OK, you'll see they nicely they clean up. When you're using the floor and foundation builder, it knows that your floor that I put in, that 4-inch floor slab at the same time as my footings, it knew that the top of that 4-inch floor slab was my floor level. When I'm just dropping in a footing, it's going to put it in at your floor level as well. So if you do have a floor on that level like we do, you can tell it to elevate it down as it needs to clean up. Okay, lots of information that we covered today. So I do want to do a recap so everybody has that information and can understand it. So at this point, I'm going to be getting to questions within the next 2 minutes. So if you do have a question, start typing those now so I'll be able to answer them for you. So at the beginning of our presentation today, we went up to settings and building locations and talked about the floor levels for the foundations. I had 2 different floor levels in my building locations today just for illustration purposes. For those of you that are using a full foundation, you want to make sure that you're going beneath grade as far down as you need to. So we went down -7'6", and we had an 8-foot wall height. So that tells me that that foundation wall, that 8-foot tall wall, is going to be poking out of the ground 6 inches because we went down -7'6". 6 inches of that stem wall is going to be sitting above grade. If you're building with a slab on grade situation, we built this slab on grade location. I kept the floor level of this location the same as my ground floor level. So if my ground floor level, if when you're building your home, you know that the top of that floor slab is only going to be 6 inches above grade, then that value can be 6 inches. We're just showing it, we're 1 foot 5.5 an inch as an illustration purpose because we have the full foundation to deal with as well. But that could be 6 inches, that could be 4 inches, that could be 1 foot. Whatever the floor level is that you're going to have to go from grade to get at to in your house, that's that floor level. And that's what I matched on my slab on grade situation. I built that slab on grade location so that my footings could be on an alternate location. So they're not going to interfere with any walls that are on my ground floor, that I can turn that off as I need to, and I can build in the secondary footings underneath any walls that I need to as well. So we dealt with the locations. And then we went into the floor and foundation builder. And we talked about all the different settings in here, that this tool itself does 2 different things. It can build secondary levels above the location that you're currently on. So above my ground floor location that's current, I could build a second, third, fourth, fifth floor, or I could build a foundation level beneath it, and it'll automatically put it beneath my current location. And it'll look at the levels that I put in here. I'm putting it on the foundation, or I'm putting it as the slab on grade situation. And this little button off to the right allows me to go double check my numbers, double check my floor levels, my wall heights as I need to. And then when I click next, I'm selecting that type of foundation system that I'm building. Is it a full basement? Is it a monolithic slab? When you're selecting these various options, you can't click next until you specify the materials that it's going to need to build that slab on grade, to build that full basement or that stem wall and footing. So whatever heights you're putting these values in at, these are the values that are going to be reflective in that building locations dialog box. Once you select these materials, and I'll just quickly select some walls so we can look at the next portion of this dialog box, and I hit next, this is where we line them up. This is the most important part, I feel, of this whole wizard. The ability to make sure that the foundation walls, the footings below, are all lined up perfectly where I want them situated in relation to the ground floor walls above. If you're just trying to duplicate walls or draw underneath like you drew the ground floor to draw out your foundation, this is much simpler. This is much more accurate. You know they're going to be directly in line, and if you need them to be offset, this is where that can happen. Once you have all of that done, you click next and you click finish, and it builds out the foundation as we had illustrated. In our foundation location, we had that full basement that we looked out at in 3D. So if I push this up here, we can see my foundation, my footings, and my wall. And I just drew a quick section in here, so we can also see my monolithic slab coming in at the same time. I've got both of them drawn. So we can see that slab going through there as well. Okay, so you've got lots of options, but most importantly, you have an accurate way of putting in your foundation system if you take advantage of the floor and foundation builder and just take the time to equate of what are the heights of those stem walls, where is there going to be a floor slab if I'm doing a full basement, and if I'm not doing a basement and I'm not having a slab, where is the top of that footing? That becomes your floor level. If there's no floor, if you're not pouring a slab on that location, what's the height of the top of that footing? That becomes that value. What I'd like to do now is answer any questions that you might have about foundation systems and how to draw them in the GoToMeeting console. Should be on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a chat section where you can type in any questions that you might have, and I'll be able to answer those live for you here during our webcast today. Never hesitate to ask a question. You have a question, probably everybody has that same question, and this gives us the opportunity to illustrate it to you live. So let's go and look at our questions and make sure that everybody gets their questions answered today. Step foundations for basement walkouts. Do I need to add a building location for every step to build the knee walls on? How do I manipulate the step length? Fantastic question. So when we're looking at our foundation system here today, and I'm just going to get rid of the slab on grade for a second so we can concentrate on just the full basement, we want to be able to step down the basement. So if we're looking at this, I'm just going to pull this into a 3D view. If our lot out the back of the house here, if it's the terrain level, and I'm just going to slope it down so we've got a good illustration here of -8 feet here. If it goes down 8 feet and you've got a walkout basement, how do you manipulate the walls and the footings to handle that so that you can step them down in that situation? I think I might have did 8 inches there. Let me just grab on that and look at the properties here and change that. Oh, that's 8 feet. Great. So we've got that going down the 8 feet. How do I step down the footings so they're stepping down for that if I want to build out a full basement out there and a walkout basement? I'm going to select this wall right here that we've got drawn. Actually, I'm just going to delete out that interior one here. So grab this whole wall right here. Notice the green dot, notice the red dot. I'm going to go into the properties of that foundation wall. And we're going to go to the top and bottom tab. Under the top and bottom tab, this is where we can manipulate the top of the wall and the bottom of the wall. So on the wall bottom, we're going to tell it that we want to step down that wall. And when we step down that wall bottom, we have to tell it, and I'm just going to move this to the side a little bit here, what's the height of the green dot? What's the extended value here at the red dot being B. So we're going to tell it's going to go down an additional 4 feet. So our green dot, our start point A, is going to stay right at 0, right where we want it, right where it's drawn currently. But the bottom end here, it's going to go down, and it's going to come down an additional 4 feet. When it's creating the steps to go the additional 4 feet, it's going to put those out evenly along this wall. And when it puts it out evenly along this wall, it wants to know what's the maximum I can step at one time. So according to your local building codes, you might find that a step can only be 8 inches, or maybe in your local area it's 1 foot or 2 feet. So you can tell it what that distance is, what's that maximum step distance. And it's going to break it down and step down the wall in maximum of 1 foot increments as it goes down. So when I click OK here, you can see how that, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so we can see it, how it's stepping down so it can go down that additional 4 feet. That stepped down the wall. The footing itself is still the same. I'm going to turn off the visibility. I'm just going to click on this view filter right here that allows me to come up to elements on terrain and turn off the visibility of the grass so we can see just the walls and our foundation. I'll click OK and they'll disappear. So my footing is still at the same height. I need to get rid of it. So I'm just going to delete out the footing itself so we can see the stepping foundation. And this wall right here, we want it to come down that additional 4 feet. So I'm going to first of all elevate it -4 feet, apply, and okay. And then I'm going to look at its properties and change the top of the wall so it's 4 feet taller. So it's 12 foot 4. So now it's 12 foot 4 because it's coming down that additional 4 feet and it's sitting down at the same level. Its footing needs to be put on it as well. So if I come to building, footings, strip footings attached to walls, I choose my 1x2 footing and left click on that wall, it'll automatically go to the bottom of it. And if I do the same here, see how it automatically goes and steps itself up. So step foundations can be accomplished. You just have to tell it where that occurs, what height it is at, and what's your maximum step, and you can step that down. That does affect your volume of concrete, so it will automatically adjust that as well. Great question. Okay, let's go back to our questions. And I will answer those. How do you do your garage separately from the house floor? Foundation wall is 2 feet above grade, and the garage floor is 20 inches below the foundation. So they're at 2 different levels. So the question is, I've got a foundation that's separate. So say this is my garage in this area. I don't want to go down 8 feet in my garage. I only want to go down 32 inches in my garage. I don't want to go down the full 8 feet. How do I accomplish that when they're at 2 totally different levels? I would still use the floor and foundation builder to track around the entire house. And then I would do the exact same thing that we did for that stepped foundation. So I'm going to just manipulate this here and draw out these foundation walls here so that they're coming up here. I would show it that this wall here is at a different height and a different level. Just like I manipulated this one to say that it's going down 4 feet lower, I would look at the properties of this wall and tell it that this wall, instead of being 12 foot 4, is only 36 inches tall. And if we look at that out in a 3D view, 36 inches gets shaved off the top of it. Okay, so now it's only 36 inches tall, but it's sitting down here. So then I have to tell it that I need to elevate that up then to get it to the right height at 9 feet. So it comes up to, oops, sorry, elevate down, and we'll change that to 6 feet, sorry, so that it's coming to the right height. So I'm only going to that height instead. And the footing itself, this one needs to be elevated up that 6 feet too. So it's coming up at the right level. So do put it on at the right, using the floor and foundation builder that's going to put them all in at -8 feet. But then in those sections where you need it to be something different, you can select those walls, and I can hold down my shift key and select multiple walls at the same time and change both of those walls, looking at their properties, changing their wall heights, and elevating using the elevate command, right-click elevate, to bring them up to the correct level that you need them. Okay, so as we did for the stepped foundation, and coming back to this back wall, we told it we wanted it to be 12 foot tall instead of 8-foot wall. We can do the exact opposite and tell it that we want this wall to be only 3 feet tall, and elevate it to the right height. Okay, so everything can be manipulated once it's put in, but it's the most accurate to use that floor and foundation builder so it's tracking accurately all the way around it, and then just changing their heights as you need to. How do you step down the top of the foundation so the exterior finish from the wall above also steps with the foundation? That's another great question. So we have the foundation wall sloped down here. when we selected it to be a step-down foundation. So how do we do the same at the top of the wall? Because I want to expose as much brick, not foundation wall, as possible. So I'm going to look at the properties of the foundation wall again and go to that top and bottom tab. Where we stepped down the bottom of the wall originally to get that stepped foundation, and we showed it that was going down an additional 4 feet and it was stepping in 1 foot, we can do the exact same thing for the top of the wall. We can tell the top of the wall, point A, you've got your red dot and you've got your green dot. So at your red dot, what's the difference in the height that we're going to be dealing with here? And what's the maximum step? So if we said the maximum step was, again, 1 foot, and that at the green dot, it's going to be at 8 feet. And at the red dot, we maybe want it to be a little shorter. Maybe at the red dot, our B point over here, we only wanted it to be 4 foot tall. Stepping down in 1 foot increments, we can see the step happening there. And then we do the same with the wall sitting above it. The wall sitting above it is going to be the same as how we extruded the base here. We look at the properties of that wall, top and bottom. We're stepping down the bottom of this wall to expose more brick. At our green dot, that is where we're going to be adding the 4 feet this time. So you can see our red dot, green dot. The green dot is where we're getting the additional 4 feet. So the green dot is A. So A is going to have an additional 4 feet, and the steps are going to happen in 1 foot increments. So when I click OK, you can see that stepping down as well. So the wall top and the wall bottom can both be manipulated when you're dealing with a daylight basement like that, so that they can come down in those additional levels that you need to. Okay, I hope that illustrated that okay for you and that everybody understands the step foundation. Great question. Glad I was able to illustrate that for you. Okay, some of you might have had a screen delay. I noticed some points where your screen was a little bit frozen and you missed some steps. So if you did want me to cover a step again, let me know and I can go over that again. But we might have caught up again, and I'm hoping that you caught up and were able to see some points of the webinar itself. And I'm just going through questions just to make sure we've answered everything. In this last example, what effect does this have on the floor framing? This won't have an effect on the floor framing. The floor framing is separate. So if you have the floor in itself, it's not going to step down the floor. It's not going to try to manipulate it in that point of view. It's going to keep the floor itself as a continuous slab as it originally was. So if you need to move the floor level up or down for that location, you can. A good example of that, where we've moved this floor, this foundation portion up, and we've moved this down, you can see that this floor, this is still at its original level. So if we needed that to move down, we would have to elevate it down the 4 feet if we wanted to bring it down to that level, or put in 2 separate slabs, one at the original level in this portion and one at the lower level if this is splitting down on the side. So it's not going to automatically change the floor. You'll have to make any adjustments to the floor separately. Okay, that seems to be the last question that I have up there, but I will hold the chat panel open for 1 further minute if there's any more questions, or if you're typing one up, I want to make sure that we do leave time so that we can answer it for you. If there aren't any questions, what I'll do is I'll email everyone out the booklet where they can read about everything that we covered in today's class about foundations and how to take yourself through the steps that we went through today. Also in the email will be a link to our archive so you can watch past presentations. Today's webinar will be added up there as well. Just give us 24 hours to be able to process it. Okay, that looks like it is all of our questions for today. So I do want to thank everyone for taking the time out today to join us for the webinar. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I hope you learned something today. And I look forward to seeing you next week in our class as well, so you can learn a little bit about Envisioneer every week. Thanks, everybody. I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.